Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 13 of my web design and programming tutorial. Today I'm going to talk to you about exception handling. Now, with PHP, if you want to show errors in the browser when they occur in your code, you're going to have to open up your PHP INI file, which you can see right here. And you're going to have to locate a line on here that's going to say display errors underscore errors equals, and it's going to say off. You want to switch this to on and then save the PHP INI file, and you're ready to go in regards to checking for errors in your code as well as exception handling. Okay, so after you have that done and saved, you're going to have to restart your server, which I trust you know how to do that. And then at that point, you're going to have to decide what type of error reporting you want to occur. And just to step back here for 1 second, an exception is just simply an error that occurs in your program. And you can make that make more sense by just saying that your code will work except if the client or the user of your program types in something. For example, if you're performing divisions and your code will work as long as they do not type in a 0, which would cause an error, you would of course want to protect from that entering of 0. And then what you do is you set up code to handle those errors, and then those errors or exceptions are thrown to that code, and that code is then used to protect against any errors showing on the screen, and in general just makes everything right. You turn on error reporting in your PHP code by typing in reporting, and then normally you're going to always type e_all. You're never going to use this in anything except developmental code, because normally, of course, you wouldn't want errors to show up, even if they did occur. It's even better for your whole entire process to just crash and not work. But this is in the development stage that you would use this code right here for reporting of any errors. And whenever you type e_all in here, this is going to warn on all errors and all warnings. And this is the most common way to use error reporting in PHP. And if you wanted to temporarily shut this off, you would just put 0 inside of there, and I'm going to leave it on. And you could also put e_strict, all in uppercase letters, and you will be notified if your code is what PHP considers non-optimized code. So that's how you turn on error reporting. Now, in regards to error handling, what you're going to do is you're going to type after the word try and in between curly brackets any code that you want to protect in regards to errors. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to call for a function called error wrangler, and I'm going to pass it the number 1 and number 2. So 2 attributes or variables. And then I'm also going to define up here number 1 is equal to 1 and number 2 is equal to 0. And because a division by 0 is going to cause an error, we are going to trigger an exception on purpose. And then if this does not cause an error, this code here is going to print number 1 divided by number 2 is, and then the answer to that division. This code here will never be triggered if an error occurs, however. You need to understand that about the try. If this causes an error, it is not going to go down here. It's going to simply handle that error. So now we need to define the function error wrangler. And you could, of course, put this code inside here that is contained inside of error wrangler and get rid of this altogether, but I just chose to do it this way. Number 1, number 2, and then you're going to say if number 2 is equal to 0. We know that's going to trigger an error. Then you want to call the throw command, new exception, and you're going to create a custom error message that will be shown on the screen. Otherwise, we're just going to return true. So the whole point of this function is to simply see if there's something wrong with this code, and I separated this out from here. Well then, if you're throwing an error, you need to catch that exception. So you're going to start it off every time with exception, followed by $E, and you're going to print out to screen error or whatever you want to. And here's the most useful functions that are going to be available to you. By paying reference to this object E, we are going to call a function that's going to print out this custom error message that you put upside here. And these are all the useful exception methods that are available to you. Get file is going to print out the file that caused the error. And you're going to see here in a second what these look like. And get line, it's going to print the line in the code that caused the error. And then close that off and close this off. Now if we run this, I'll save it. You can see can't divide by 0 shows up, and it shows the location of the code that triggered the error right there on the second line. And it shows you also that the error occurred at line 18 inside of your code. And if you'd actually want to overwrite the class exception object. You could also do that and create custom error catching inside of PHP. How you would do that is come in here and just extend that class. So I'm going to call this my new class, Error Wrangler, and it's going to extend the exception class. And then I'm going to define inside of this a function that I'm going to call error report. And what it's going to do is create a string that's going to contain all of that error information that we talked about before. And this is identical to what you saw before, except because we're working with an object here, we're going to use the this method, which is a reference to the exception object, but everything else is identical. Get the file that triggered the error, and get the line that the error occurred on, and then close that off. And then this guy is just going to return that string you just created right there. And that is actually the end of the class. That's all that you wanted to change with this said class. So we're now going to create another try block where we think an error could occur. And I'm going to show you a couple different exceptions that you can handle, or how to handle multiple exceptions. So let's say if the number 2 is equal to 0, we want one exception to be thrown. So throw new error wrangler can't by 0. Close that off. Else if, no space, number 2 is equal to 1. Let's just say to be funny, because you can throw an error on anything. Throw new exception. This is the default exception that you throw. And if you do this, what's on this line, it will guarantee that any errors are caught. Don't divide by 1. I'm just making something up here. And then we don't need to put the else in here. We're just going to go, if neither of those things happened, number 1 divided by number 2 is, and then just put number 1 divided by number 2, just like that. And then we're going to close off our try block. And now we have to catch those errors if they are thrown. And this is our custom exception handling class that we created, Error Wrangler, right here. And if this is triggered, we're going to shoot out the screen exactly the returned information that we get from the function called error report. And if you wanted to log this error to a text file, is you would take this same code that's returned from the error report function, this string right here, and this will log it to a text file that you can look at later on or see all your errors in one place. This is actually very useful. 3 means that you want this information outputted to a text file and the name of the text file. And of course you have to have permission to write to it. And the die function, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with exception handling, but I just wanted to go over it. What it will do is, if it is ever called, it will kill your program and no longer run anything. And if that is called, we're going to have it also print out a message to the screen that says something bad happened. So there's another function. And then if you want to make sure that you catch all other exceptions that are thrown, just catch the generic exception. Just like that, but always make sure this is the last exception that you catch. If you put this up here, it's going to actually catch this error, even though that one is not called. So that's very important to always keep this exception, this catch-all exception, last in your sequences of catches. And if that's called, we're going to simply call the get message that is sent, which is this message right here. Don't divide by 1. And we're going to print that to screen, just like that. And if we file save that, you can see right here it printed error can't divide by 0. This is this guy right here because number 2 equaled 0. It's going to print the location of the code that caused the error, the specific line in which that error occurred, and then also something bad happened because the die function was called right here. And if we jump up here and click on this and put 1 inside of here, file save it, jump over here, you can see that don't divide by 1 was called, which was called by this guy right here. This was the catch-all exception. And then, of course, if you come in here and type in a legitimate number and file save it, you can see that it printed out legitimate information because there was no exception to handle. So that is just a brief overview of a bunch of little things that in regards to how you use exception handling inside of PHP. Now, of course, I'm going to get a lot more into it in the upcoming examples that are coming, and especially whenever we start getting into how to secure PHP. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. And otherwise, till next time.